complication is when couples are dealing with infertility, it's often
Hmm.
we have to have sex now. We have the stressors of infertility.
Yeah.
And as a woman who has dealt with it, every time you have your, a negative pregnancy test or your period shows up, it's like loss again and again and again. DHEA works on all three layers of the vaginal wall. So it's why I have clients in their 60s telling me they have vaginas of their 25-year-old. I'm a 25-year-old, like they've anti-age, and I'm always like, best biomarker there is, best biomarker of aging there is. And cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, all of those are very good for fertility.
Let's talk about the vaginal microbiome. What should people know when it comes to vaginal health?
Oh my gosh, this is so important now. And
Dr. Cabeca, how have you been, my friend?
I am so good. It's good to be here and good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. I always love, we just catch up in front of hundreds of thousands of people.
That's right.
It's no big deal, right? It's like, it's life. It's life. Like when we're like in between patients and then doing the podcast in between patients, just the way that it is. You can't change it.
Totally. And I love it when we share clients too. I just love that.
Yes, I know. We do. We have mutual telehealth patients for sure. Let's talk about that. I mean, what have you been up to lately? Clinically, what's exciting you?
Yeah. So I am seeing patients clinically here in Dallas for the last year and a half. So, or a little, almost 2 years now, but one of the things post-pandemic medicine is different than pre-pandemic medicine. And
Yeah.
we talked about this when I had you on my podcast, and it's fascinating. Just the approach that we have to take now and more than ever needs to be integrative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what are you seeing? I mean, let's talk about fertility. I think that's something that a lot of people are talking about it more and more because people are trying to get pregnant, and it's for a lot of people, they're really struggling with it. Why? What are we facing as a society right now as far as fertility? What do the stats say?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's significant. It's approximately, we used to say, okay, 30% of, couples will have an issue with fertility, and that predominant 30% of those, 40% of those were male factor. And we've seen
Mhm.
that rate increase significantly. We've seen that rate increase significantly where
Mhm.
some, studies have indicated even, higher rates. And so when I think of this, that just first thing when you said infertility, it brought a patient to my mind, post-pandemic patient, who I would love to share her story because they can really share a success story in this, and we can all use some hope.
Yeah, for sure.
So one
Yeah,
of the things,
yeah. Go
yeah,
tell us about it.
and especially because I think, my story was I had early menopause and infertility when I was 39. And was told I would never be able to have another child. So reverse that, with the grace of God and learning healing traditions from around the world, but reverse that early menopause, then naturally conceive the child I was told I would never be able to have when I was
Hmm.
41. And so I had this, and from that story, it attracts a lot of clients that are struggling with infertility. And I had this client who came in last last September, and post-pandemic. She'd had a child pre-pandemic, no complications, full term, vaginal delivery, no problems, healthy pregnancy. And then she had a second pregnancy in the midst of the pandemic, post vaccine too, as a matter of fact. And it was a trisomy child. And then she had a miscarriage. And then she was diagnosed with infertility and then early menopause that had a very low AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, which is one of the ways that we can look at, the option, fertility success with IVF. So she wasn't even a candidate for IVF, and she was 36 years old. And so she was heartbroken. And she flew in to see me, and with this background, she said, the IVF clinics refused me. I've tried everything up to this point, and I'm struggling. So with that, we look at immune factors now post-pandemic. I've had to learn all kinds of
Hmm.
immunology. It's crazy. So we work to boost her immune system, remove spike protein effects and side effects, and just enhance her body's natural hormone production as well as detox her receptor sites and remove hormone disruptors from her body. So support her detoxification pathways. And so we did that, and we did that aggressively. I would say she did that aggressively because she was very, very motivated. She goes, I said, regardless, we want you to have the healthiest body possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did high dose IV vitamin C, ozone therapies, integrative approach following my Keto Green 16 plan, Mighty Maca. We used progesterone the second half of the cycle and some other supplementation that we used, like, the typical post-COVID ones, NAC, bromelain. So she did everything. She did everything. And we were working on that for 3 months. We said, well, let's give it her AMH 10x in that amount of time, still subfertile in the subfertile, but in 2 to 3 months, her AMH 10x improved. And then we repeated again in 2 months, and it had again double, triple. And I said, okay, we'll keep working on this detoxification. And in 3 months, we'll plan on trying to, you can plan on trying to get pregnant. And so she was supposed to follow up with me in 7 weeks from that. And she did. She said, Dr. Ann, I'm 7 weeks pregnant. I was like, what? You didn't wait. She said, don't be angry at
Yeah.
me. I said, I couldn't be happier. And she sent me these pictures, and I just will, I love to, she sent me these pictures over Thanksgiving holiday, and she's delivered her beautiful baby girl. So now she has two
Oh,
baby girls, and she delivered these beautiful pictures of her family. And it was just, I couldn't be happier for her. So
that's
just
so sweet.
gorgeous, right? Just a gorgeous
Oh my
baby, right?
gosh.
We can
Beautiful
love that.
baby.
When she was told there was no hope, she wasn't a candidate for
Yeah.
IVF, and she fought back, and I love that.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
cool. Not taking no for an answer if you feel
And
like,
and
in your body, this is not right. What I'm being told is not going to be my future.
exactly. And naturally conceived. No IVF, no Clomid, no fertility meds, right?
Hmm. All
Yeah.
right. So you mentioned AMH. Like, what are there any labs that you think if someone's maybe having trouble conceiving, they're not diagnosed as having fertility issues, they just maybe want to be proactive and maybe direct or indirect, quote unquote, fertility tests or metabolic tests that maybe they could impact fertility? Any essential labs that you think people should be getting?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, ideally what I want every patient pre-pregnancy to get is like a NutriVal. One of these really big tests that looks at your organic acid, your detoxification pathways, your toxic burden, and your essential fatty acids. I mean, that is ideal. So way back when, 2006, I created the Women's Health Profile for Metametrics, which was a combination of functional tests. Genova then bought Metametrics, and they
Hmm.
retired the test because they have the NutriVal. But what we look at is the ADMA, and that's another blood test that you can get from any lab.
Hmm.
ADMA is a good marker for arginine metabolism, but also risk of miscarriage and hypertension and preeclampsia in
Hmm.
pregnancy. And so if we can avoid that as an obstetrician, we definitely want to avoid that. So knowing that ADMA is key. And then your fatty acid profile, like how are your omegas right now?
Hmm.
If every client who's had two or more babies, when I look at those essential fatty acid profiles, they're usually in the tank.
Hmm.
Pregnancy takes a lot out of us, and especially when we breastfeed, et cetera. So we deplete those good omega-3 fatty acids, the DHA, the EPA, we tend to deplete those. So making sure we're starting out at a healthy level, it's powerful too. And then, as far as hormonally, looking at cycle day 2, FSH, LH, estradiol, and the AMH, cycle day 21, progesterone, full, complete thyroid panel.
Hmm.
And those are some key tests. And I would look at nutritionally carnitine, CoQ10, because for men and women, that's key
Yeah.
for mitochondrial health. So ovarian egg production and sperm production too.
Yeah, got it. So for hormones specifically, this hormone test you mentioned, do you prefer urine, saliva, like Dutch test and blood test together? I mean, what's your opinion on blood versus the free fraction urine, saliva tests?
Yeah. So for the hormone testing I mentioned, that's all blood, LH, FSH. estradiol, the progesterone levels on cycle day 21. We can look at those. So the day 2, we want to look at those early in the luteal phase to look at ovarian function, and that gives us ovarian reserve essentially, and the AMH at that time too. For day 21, we can do that with Dutch test, urinary testing, because that also will then look at estrogen metabolites, et
Hmm.
cetera. So we can look at and the progesterone as well as your adrenal function, DHEA, because the body does, not want to make another body in a high stressed
Yeah.
environment, right?
Yeah.
So we look at that cortisol pathway. So there's good ways. I think there's times and place for all testing. And I always tell my clients, I'm going to test every body fluid you have, including your stool at one point or another, because it gives us information.
Yeah. It's so true. So true. You mentioned some of the herbal botanical agents that you used in that one case, that success story. What are your favorite herbs, botanicals, micronutrients, like non-pharmaceutical things that people can take in supplement form to be supportive of hormone balance and fertility?
Oh, yeah. So definitely for me, everyone gets Mighty Maca Plus. So the combination of maca, quercetin, resveratrol, turmeric, grapeseed extract, the alkalinizing blend detoxifier. So in the adaptogens, and Mighty Maca Plus is by far, it's like my first foundational supplement I put clients on. And it also supporting detoxification. So we've got lots of Mighty Maca babies in and of itself. So that is the one that definitely for sure. And then carnitine is another supplement that I do use for fertility and during pregnancy. The research on carnitine in pregnancy is powerful. We know it's important for mitochondrial function. So again, why it's so important in fertility, but it's also really good for neurologic function.
Mhm.
So anywhere between 600 to 1500 milligrams once to twice a day,
Mhm.
depending on what a clients' organic acid shows when we look at these functional tests. And then, and then of course, N-acetylcysteine to promote detoxification down the glutathione pathways.
Yeah.
So that is another reason that I will definitely use that. And there's certain, other adaptogenic blends that we can use. But when I look for fertility, I'm predominantly using CoQ10, carnitine, NAC, and then, of course, the adaptogens in Mighty Maca too. And then
Yeah.
the second half of the cycle, if I need to, adding progesterone.
Okay, yeah. So you touched on that and kind of doing a cyclical approach with bioidentical progesterone. Can you go through that? Like when is that warranted using progesterone in that cyclical way? And what's that protocol look like?
Okay, and I just had to look back up. Arterisol and Tolivit were the two other supplements that we
It
put
was gonna
on.
bug you until you
It
knew.
was going to bug
Yeah.
me until I found it. It was going to bug me because I was
I
like,
knew
I
your
know it.
brain. It's like, what is it? I was thinking phosphatidylcholine. I didn't know because I've had good success with that too. Higher doses
That
of
is
that.
such a great one. I
Yeah.
didn't put that on her, but I use phosphatidylcholine a lot.
Yeah. All right. Sorry for interrupting. But so the progesterone used on the second half of the cycle, what's that protocol look like, and who could be a good candidate for that approach?
Yeah. So anyone with progesterone insufficiency, luteal phase defect, we use those terms in obstetrics and gynecology, but what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
It means the ovary's not producing enough progesterone to support a pregnancy, to
Hmm.
support pregnancy. And we think about the hormones of pregnancy. Estrogen helps with fertility, helps with the endometrial lining, making it lush, and progesterone organizes that endometrial lining so that the implantation of the embryo can implant and then grow. And when you have insufficient progesterone, there's not that good base for and can increase the risk of miscarriage. So if you have insufficient progesterone, that can increase the risk of miscarriage, and oftentimes before we even have a positive pregnancy test.
Hmm.
So when we look at numbers, they say, 30% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, but usually before they're diagnosed, right? Before that missed period. And that can be partly due to genetic abnormalities, but as we get older, more commonly due to progesterone insufficiency. So, so when we look at blood work, we look at a cycle day 21 blood test of progesterone, and we want that greater than 15. And
Hmm.
in pregnancy, early pregnancy, at that time of diagnosis, we want it greater than 20. And then I don't have to worry about you, right? I don't have to worry about you. You're going to be great. Pregnancy is going to stick. It should be very healthy, ideally, 99.99% of the time. And then, and so looking at if it's less than that, we work to support your body's natural luteal phase, your ovarian production, and then supplementing with progesterone if we need to.
Hmm.
So when I supplement initially in perimenopause, menopause, I often use topical progesterone with pregnenolone
Hmm.
because the combination helps mood, memory, and the combination works better than either of them by themselves in my experience. And I
Hmm.
say that as a caveat, it works better for me. And I started using it for my patients in this way and got great feedback. So I combine progesterone and pregnenolone in my balance cream, and I'll use that the second half of this cycle. And if we're not finding that that's sufficient, so PMS symptoms don't decrease, continue issue with fertility, then we'll add oral progesterone, typically 200 milligrams, sometimes higher, but typically 200 milligrams from post ovulation. So maybe cycle day 14 to cycle day 28
Got it.
or till pregnancy occurs. And oftentimes I'll keep patients on that progesterone until I have documented therapeutic progesterone levels in the blood.
Hmm. Got it. So beyond labs and seeing the labs improve, and obviously someone that's trying to get pregnant, getting pregnant, you mentioned some of the other symptoms that people can notice. So let's say it's not about fertility for somebody; it's just they're having these PMS symptoms. What are other telltale signs that people can look out for that maybe their progesterone's a bit lagging and they need to be looking at this area?
One of the things is I always tell my clients, if you only hate your partner 2 weeks out of the month, it's most likely your
Okay.
hormones, not necessarily your partner. If it's only 2 weeks.
It may be
So
both, but whatever.
that's a symptom for sure. So anxiety, irritation, and mood swings for sure. Weight gain can be another because progesterone is a natural diuretic. Bioidentical progesterone is not synthetic progestins. We'll never use progestins
Hmm.
in preparing in a body in general. We should not be. So so with bioidentical progesterone, it's a natural diuretic, so that can help with um, the if you're gaining weight. By some people will gain 5 pounds in their luteal phase or before their period, and that is because of oftentimes insufficient progesterone or estrogen dominance too.
Hmm.
Brain fog, um, memory loss, decreased libido,
Hmm.
hair loss. Those are some of the most common symptoms.
Got it. Is there any specific foods you like people to be focusing on when they're struggling with these hormone numbers, just to be supportive of this larger goal?
Yeah, for me, progesterone and insulin compete. So we have to create insulin sensitivity.
Hmm.
And that's critical. So part of my plans, the Keto Green 16 plan, for instance, it is designed to increase insulin sensitivity. So it's cutting out carbs,
Hmm.
really using very healthful carbs strategically in your cycle, but really cutting out carbs with intermittent fasting, creating that insulin sensitivity, especially for those of us who have issues. And most of us, like 80% of us, have issues with insulin resistance. So
Hmm.
creating that keto green kind of diet lifestyle. So I love the cruciferous vegetables to help with estrogen detoxification.
Hmm.
I love high quality organic grass fed meat. We want to avoid anything that is farm raised because you're getting a dose of antibiotics and a lot of other hormones that your body then has to compete against. And
Hmm.
that will disrupt your natural body's production of hormones.
Yeah.
And so focusing on high quality protein, healthy fats like avocado, salmon, grass fed meat, good things like that, and nuts and oils, olive oil and lots of good alkalinizing greens. Like, one of my favorite foods is tabbouleh. So parsley, tomatoes, onions, garlic, And those all, talk about supporting phase two detoxification. They support our detoxification pathways too. So these are medicinal foods, and cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, all of those are very good for fertility. Oysters is another superfood for fertility as well
Yeah.
because it's high in zinc.
Yeah.
That's one.
I love it. Okay. So obviously fertility, we're talking about women fertility and that side of the equation, but it's not always the women, or maybe it's both the man and the woman. Any advice for the guys out there that's looking to be as, supportive of their potency, their fertility as much as possible?
Yeah, definitely. So the same kind of supplements too.
Yeah.
Keto green lifestyle, really reduce carbs, increase insulin sensitivity that will help with testosterone and our natural hormone production. Carnitine as a supplement, CoQ10 in subfertile males. I definitely use those supplementations. Carnitine, sometimes up to 1,500 milligrams twice a day. CoQ10, 100 twice a day. 100 milligrams twice a day depends. And for both, optimizing vitamin D level. And I failed to mention that,
So, yeah.
but in insufficient vitamin D levels, less than 30, less than 40,
Yeah.
hormones do not work well. Your progesterone won't work, your oxytocin won't work. Well, you need healthy vitamin D on board. So that is key and first line to optimize. I mean, it's so much a part of our practices that, I
You
forget
don't
to
even,
mention it.
yeah, I know it is. It's just so fundamental, right?
Yeah. And for men too, boxer shorts, avoid heat, being gentle that way. And for a couple dealing with infertility, doing everything possible to increase oxytocin, the
Hmm.
most healing and most powerful hormone in our body, the hormone that, like, when we laugh, when we have fun, when we orgasm, we increase the secretions of oxytocin. And it is incredibly healing to our physiology. And the complication is when couples are dealing with infertility, it's often
Hmm.
we have to have sex now. We have the stressors of infertility.
Yeah.
And as a woman who has dealt with it, every time you have your, a negative pregnancy test or your period shows up, it's like loss again and again and again.
Yeah.
And it can be very, very stressful. But prioritizing fun, laughter, focusing on gratitude and positivity is one of the most impactful things that a couple can do.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. You mentioned oxytocin here, the sort of the impact that cortisol can have on oxytocin and vice versa. Can you talk about that connection? Because that's not enough people know about it. And you gave us some tips there to sort of remedy that. But what
Yeah.
is going on there physiologically as far as the connection between the two?
Yeah. So oxytocin and cortisol are often at war with each other, right?
Yeah.
And cortisol is a life-saving hormone. It's a great hormone, but too much too often, it's a devastating hormone. It will basically break us down, rob Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. It will,
Hmm.
damages our cellular physiology and also creates an acidification in our body and
Hmm.
inflammation when it's too long, too high, and can really affect us. And it's a natural anti-inflammatory. So it has this double-edged, it's basically a double-edged sword. But when cortisol goes up, think of a seesaw.
Hmm.
When cortisol goes up, oxytocin goes down. When oxytocin goes up, cortisol goes down. But
Hmm.
when cortisol is up and oxytocin is down, when cortisol is up too long, the paraventricular nucleus in the brain will say, hey, cortisol, you are frying me out. And
Hmm.
then it suppresses that cortisol production. So it's not like the adrenals are fatigued or tired, they're just suppressed. So it
Hmm.
becomes adrenal hypofunction. You're in this dangerous physiologic state where cortisol is low and oxytocin is low at the same time. And what that feels like, that's the physiology of burnout. That's
Yeah.
the, physiology of like the sensation I love my husband, but I don't feel love for him.
Hmm.
I used to love going to the office and go to work, but now I don't, I can't even bear to leave my house or whatever. Or you go to a restaurant, you see a longtime friend, and you're like, I'm pretending no one sees me right now. I'm pretending I'm invisible. Like you become more, your world becomes smaller with this physiology, and it's destructive.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, so much of it's that there's neuroendocrine communication lines, right? If someone's stressed, it's the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic for so many people, and their hormones are, as you said, it's not the adrenal glands, fault per se, but it's that communication line between the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the endocrine system as a whole.
Exactly, exactly. Just needing a reset, needing, to focus. I found, with working on adrenals and adrenal dysfunction so long in my practice in the early 2000s, and
Hmm.
then experiencing it myself and realizing, I've putting all my attention on cortisol. When I shifted to put all my attention on the antidote,
Hmm.
oxytocin, like
Yeah.
focusing gratitude, focusing on, positive thoughts, doing things I loved and enjoyed, even when I didn't want to, right? The things that would make me laugh.
Yeah.
Though when you put the focus on oxytocin, everything gets better.
Yeah.
Everything gets better. And that's what I teach is that, we can look at all these micro issues, but like let's not leave out the most powerful thing we can do, increasing oxytocin, which really is free. There's so many ways to increase oxytocin free.
Yeah, so much. You mentioned keto, like your keto greens protocol. So a specific type of keto. It's definitely intentional. Can you kind of dispel the myths out there? Because people, when they hear keto or like fasting mimicking things or lower carb things or fasting maybe as a whole, they automatically think, oh, I thought that was bad for women's hormones and bad for
Yeah.
fertility. Can you kind of clarify that your position on that?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times, first of all, that's what I used to believe too, right? I used to believe that a long time ago till when I was, working with patients with fertility issues and my own issues, that I found that this was essential. And my keto green is different than a straight keto because I focus on the alkalinizers and the nutritional balance and medicinal menus. The menus I create are all medicinal menus to support phase one and phase two detoxification. And I put a blanket rule of thumb like 10% of the time fasting, 80% keto green, 10% feasting. Don't leave out the feasting, right? We have to have that metabolic flexibility. And fasting too long, keto too long is very destructive for women because it increases cortisol, increases acidity, and it increases, it really affects the entire body in so many
Hmm.
ways. And because men have been doing, have really it was very male dominated in the keto space, and there was me, this postmenopausal woman, coming into keto space. But anyway, it was this very men have 10 times as much testosterone, so that's very protective. But what
Yeah.
I noted in myself and then in my patients, when you start to get to bump into keto, you have to check your urine pH because it would become very, very acidic, and then add stress and add all these other things. So for me, one of the most important biomarkers is checking urine pH. It's
Hmm.
costs pennies a day. It's you do it, every time you pee or at least every morning, and just check that urine pH because it tells you so much about your body. I mean, I've been doing this online for so many years now, over a decade, and that's the one thing that I hear when clients really get that alkalinity down, their body feels they feel at home in their body is what I've heard
Hmm.
over and over and over again. And that was definitely true for me.
Hmm.
So this combination of intermittent fasting is key, especially for perimenopausal and menopausal women, because again, especially in today's date where we're becoming more insulin resistant, children are dealing with insulin resistance and
Hmm.
pre-diabetes and diabetes. You have
Yeah.
got to adapt this type of lifestyle to empower our genetics and our hormones and give our body time with intermittent fasting, 13 to 16 hours. And for me, I don't like women to fast past 10 a.m. Depends on their cycle and depends everyone different, but I
Yeah.
rather have them eat dinner by 5 or 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And that honors our clock genes, our metabolic clock genes.
Yeah. That circadian rhythm is really important there. What do you overall, from a environmental toxin standpoint, we're talking about hormone health, and then people hear about endocrine disruptors, PFAS, the forever chemicals, microplastics, herbicides, pesticides, but it can be overwhelming, right? Because it's so ubiquitous. What are your top tools or tips to decrease the amount of toxic exposure?
Yeah, so less is more, right? Less is more. But air filters, I think, are mandatory.
Hmm.
And, there are some great ones out there now. Water filters are mandatory. And in your shower, in your baths, especially if you have kids and you're giving them nice long baths, you
Hmm.
definitely want water filters on there too. And organic, so avoiding pesticides, herbicides, perfumes, cosmetics. I like to choose my toxins, hence, red, bright red lipstick, but choose your toxins and eliminate the ones you don't need and choose better options. There's so many good options we have nowadays. But when we consider since 1970s, there's 147,000 more chemicals have been introduced to our system. And
Yeah.
in 2010, so this is over a decade ago, an umbilical cord blood samples found over 197, I'm going to say 212 toxic chemicals within umbilical cord blood. We've got to do a better job of eliminating these toxins. And sadly, we can't expect our government to do it for us. Hopefully, things will change, but
Yeah.
industry is big, but we can change it based on consumer dollars. And then empowering our detoxification pathways. That's why I created medicinal menus. And in my supplement line, it's the combination of ingredients to support detoxification. You have to detox.
Hmm.
And one of the things from my journeys around the world and studying world medicine is I learned from traditional Chinese medicine, great Egyptian and Arabic physicians and Indian Ayurvedic practitioners, is that you got to heal the liver. You got to address the liver. And it's so true for hormones, for menopause, for fertility. You have to address the liver.
Yeah. In that the sulfur rich vegetables you mentioned N-acetylcysteine, some of these glutathione precursors, going back to sulfur, like sulforaphane rich foods. Like these are some of the best, your food protocol and the intentionality behind that. When you talk about supporting the liver, those are some great ways to do it. The things you mentioned earlier are
Garlic,
the
lots of
garlic.
garlic.
Yeah. Are there any other, like, do you like milk thistle? What, any other things that you love for liver support?
Yeah, definitely milk thistle. It's in Mighty Maca for that reason too. But ginger is amazing.
Yeah.
Bitters to get your digestive
Yes.
juices going too.
Love bitters.
That's
Yeah.
powerful. And then probiotic rich foods. So your fermented vegetables, um, fermented vegetables, fermented foods, things like that it's super important to support, especially and probiotics, supplementing with probiotics, looking at gut test. Functional
Hmm.
digestive stool analysis is the proper word for poop test. When we look
Yeah.
at those, over now 2 decades of evaluating them, there is often an insufficiency in the healthy commensal supportive bacteria that are within our GI tract. And it's because if you go out to eat anytime, you eat chicken or fish, they've been swimming in antibiotics, and then your
Hmm.
body gets a dose of antibiotics, and that creates antibiotic resistant genes as well as an impair, dysbiosis, we say imbalance
Hmm.
in gut bacteria. So being very disciplined about probiotic use
Hmm.
periodically at least and
Hmm.
following up digestive stool analyses is very important.
Yeah. Agreed. You mentioned the gut microbiome. Let's talk about the vaginal microbiome and vaginal health. That's something that I think not enough people talk about. I mean, we talk about it clinically, but it's not a topic that I've talked about a lot on the podcast. It's something that you have educated people for so long about in our space about vaginal health. Can you talk about that? Like, what should people know when it comes to vaginal health?
Oh my gosh, this is so important now. And, only in the past few years, and maybe not just in less than the last decade, have we had tests to look at the vaginal bacteria
Hmm.
and then really identifying that the predominant bacteria within the vagina is lactobacillus, predominantly Lactobacillus crispatus. And so now that we have this knowledge, we can look at clients who've had recurrent vaginitis, urinary tract infections, discharge, odors, all of these things that really impair our quality of life when it's not healthy down there. And I always say that's the most important real estate of our body. So when it's not healthy down there, it is not a good day, right? It is
Hmm.
just not a good day.
Yeah.
And so being able to look at this microbiome, and what's really important is as we age, so from our mid 30s onward,
Hmm.
there's changes to the vaginal microbiome. We start to go from a very acidic pH, which is protective. Imagine acidic vaginal pH makes sense because you want to avoid,
Yeast overgrowth. Yeah.
bacteria, but
Yeah.
right, you want to viruses, etc. So you got to keep that vaginal pH very nice and acidic. But as we age, it naturally becomes more alkaline. Also, on birth control pills, it becomes more alkaline. So
Yeah.
that's decreasing your defense mechanisms. And as we age with less um, acidic, so more alkaline vaginal pH, you're more susceptible to bacterial vaginosis, that fishy odor, smell, and infections and cervical cancer. And also, the vaginal bacteria goes from being very focused on lactobacillus to very diverse. And it's the
Mhm.
opposite of what we want in the gut, which blew my mind when I learned this. So in the vagina, you want a very, very specific strains, decrease diversity. And in
Mhm.
the gut, you want more diversity. But as we age, more diversity, more prone, and we're more prone to infections and cervical cancer. So it
Mhm.
is so important to address vaginal health. I say it is key to optimal health.
Yeah. Do you recommend more from the inside out supporting vaginal health? And if that's yes or no, and then topically, any suppositories or creams, any specific ingredients people should consider?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I've been researching this area for a long time as a gynecologist and as a surgeon. Just, I think it's so much that we can do to improve women's lives this way. So definitely from for vaginal bacteria standpoint, first off and foremost for that healthy cultivation, you've got to get the vaginal pH back down. And I found that using topical DHEA, my
Mhm.
product is with DHEA and plant stem cells of the alpine rose, and this combination with the emollients decreases that vaginal pH, reverses the hands of time essentially. So that comment and using it externally can be safe to use internally, but externally you get that good absorption. And DHE is very safe, even in my breast cancer patients. Again, everyone's individual, talk with
Mhm.
your doctor,
Mhm.
but I do this very frequently and I use that. And the research has shown that topical DHEA at the vaginal vulvar area converts to testosterone and estrogen just at the intrinsic level. So at the cellular level, we don't see any significant increases in systemic levels in the blood. So, but it's working locally. And it's important to note that when we're taking oral hormones or other hormones on other areas of our body, it's not going to address the pelvic floor like we need it to. So the topical application of hormones is really critical. And because I use DHEA because we know estrogen is good for the mucosal layer of the vagina, so the first layer, but it doesn't help the muscularis layers. DHEA works on all three layers of the
Mhm.
vaginal wall. So it's why I have clients in their 60s telling me they have vaginas of their 25-year, but 25-year-old, like they've anti-age, and I'm always like, best biomarker there is, best biomarker of aging there is. But a caveat too is because there's a lot of news, even on social, about using vaginal estrogens. As a gynecologist, I often see the cream, 1 to 2 days after they've used it within the vaginal walls, especially older patients postmenopausal. And so I dug into the research. How long is it in the vagina? And, we used to think, okay, well, it absorbs very, very quickly. And it doesn't. It's 7 to 17 hours on some studies. So, and then again, I've had clients use one of the vaginal ovules, the Invexi product, and I saw it in 2 days later, she comes to see me for her pap smear and it's still within the vagina. So that
Mhm.
will transfer to a male partner where with DHEA and testosterone, you don't have to worry about that. So for clients with male partners, you do not want them to get any more estrogen
Mhm.
necessarily,
Yeah. No, for sure.
unless you want them to be nicer. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Secret clinical pearls there.
Right. That's it. Now I have women using their vaginal estrogen going right for sex. But it will cause erectile dysfunction. So
Yeah.
that's the other,
Which may
maybe
never mind.
nicer, but
Yeah, some trade-offs. Hey, you can't have everything. My friend, this is great as always. As you know, the podcast is called The Art of Being Well. You've been on the pod before, so you know. At the end of every episode, we have your art of being well. I'm going to try to throw out different questions. I don't remember what I asked you last time, but it's whatever comes to the top of my head. What's someplace you haven't traveled to in the world that you want to, that's on your bucket list?
Oh my gosh. I haven't, there's so many places that you ask me. I want to go to Andorra. I definitely want to go to Andorra. So, a Portuguese speaking area of Africa that just has been on my heart to go to for a long time. I've been to North Africa, to Egypt. I did medicine in Egypt for a while, way back. And so I think that's it. I would go back again and again to Brazil. So,
I love it. Brazil.
I love traveling. Traveling is good medicine.
It is. That's why I ask it. It is good medicine. People like getting outside of our comfort zone and learning about different cultures or just self care and relaxing, right? It is such good medicine.
Oh, wait, I got to add Ireland. Ireland is
Oh,
big time on my heart. I'm a huge Irish fan. So,
yeah. I went last year. I plan to go next year as well. It was beautiful. I went to the west with the cliffs of Moher and I stayed in a County Clare area. It was beautiful. And the people are some of God's kindest people, the Irish people.
I'm going. I'm going to
Yeah,
make
you
that.
have to go. It's your sign.
Yep,
It's your sign.
that's it. Done.
And I was not to geek out too much, but I love history and ancestry and all that stuff. So they took me to all of these Paleolithic, ancient, Druidic type areas they're still there. They just look like rock formations, and you could, if you were on a hike, you would walk right past them. But they're basically were defense mechanisms thousands of years ago. And we're talking like prehistorical time period that's just overgrown. It's overgrown with brush, but it's when you look at it from above, it's a complete, basically a city wall fort in County Clare. You have to go check it out.
Oh my gosh, I'm definitely going to go check it out. And it
Yeah.
reminds me of the new excavations on Easter Island, where
Oh,
they're like
yes.
just seeing these are just a part of the entire monolith below. And it just,
Yes.
yeah, to be able to see what was this.
Yeah. You know, other place, I'm going to go on a tangent now, but
Yeah,
people
no,
like
they
love
keep
this stuff.
talking travel.
Yeah. I want to go to Ethiopia because I keep hearing about, and I meet a lot of Ethiopians when I travel around the United States, and I always talk to them about, about their country. And there's this church. Do you know about this church? It's basically dug underground, and it's like, how did they dig this ground? But apparently, the legend goes that the Ark of the Covenant is there, and people that are spending time with, like the priests that spend time there, go blind and get all of this sort of radioactive type symptoms from being with this supposed Ark Covenant. We don't know what it is because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church kind of, it's sacred. Have you heard about this? It's fascinating to me.
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, it sounds amazing. I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to be looking this up because things like Petra in Jordan and
Hmm.
I've done the up the Nile and the incredible tombs and oh my gosh, I mean just unbelievable stuff that's in the middle of the desert. You're like, how? Machu Picchu, for instance, right?
Hmm.
Like these
Yeah.
are there's just so much of the world to see. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm
You
adding
got,
Ethiopia. I'm going to definitely look at that.
yeah, you can check it out. We'll go
But that
together.
also goes back to
Yeah.
like looking back at historical medicines, right?
Yeah.
Historically, what was used for medicine and the practices that were used, some good, some not good, but it's
Hmm.
just so fascinating to me, the practices.
Yeah. Right. You mentioned doing medicine in Egypt. What was that like? What did you do?
Oh my goodness. I was a medical student. I created the International Student Exchange with Egypt. And so I was in the Alexandria hospital system. So in Alexandria, Egypt, and I was 23 years old, 24 years old. And I mean, it was incredible because I learned how to be a great clinician there in Alexandria in the university system. I mean, everyone didn't have their Palm Pilots, their books. This is 1992, I think, summer of 1992. And they memorized their books and they were excellent clinicians. Patients would walk in and the physicians would be able to diagnose them based on their clinical presentation. Look at the color of their
Hmm.
conjunctive of their eyes, look at their stance, look at the shape of their abdomen.
Hmm.
And it was just, it changed. I never learned that in any place that I studied in the United States, and I studied at some amazing places.
Wow.
I really admired that
Well, it's like,
clinical ability.
yeah, right. That's obviously very science backed in this sort of modern medicine state, but it's still, I think, held to this artistic the art of science, right? The art of medicine, that I think when we outsource so much to technology, and this applies not to just medicine, but to so much, right? It sterilizes something that these people just knew anecdotally from experience. There was like the sharpness that happens with using the human mind in that way, right?
Exactly, the observation, and not
Hmm.
just that, touch and smell and,
Yeah.
like the feel. I mean, it really was powerful. I loved it. I definitely want to go back. And the other thing too is they couldn't order MRIs or
Hmm.
CT scans. It was ridiculously expensive. And, and plus I saw some of the most incredible, conditions, because sometimes people came on train for hours to come into the university system to get help.
Hmm.
So it was very advanced disease states too, and how they were handled, how the patients were treated. It was really a beautiful experience.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing that. What's a book that you've read? It could be fiction, nonfiction. I'm trying to get like a running Art of Being Well book club, but like, what's a book that you recommend for this
Oh
proverbial
my
book
God,
club?
God's Hotel. God's Hotel.
Okay.
My friend, Dr. Margaret Christensen, gave it to me when she heard I was walking the Camino de Santiago. And so in this book, it really does go back to United States, how hospitals were really part of the monasteries or the church systems, and were designed to be communities to foster health, essentially, and recovery, and not throwing people out into the cold with mental illness. But over the time of the chapters in the book, goes from that original um, system of healthcare
Hmm.
to the very much number keeper um, type of system of healthcare that we're seeing today. And in between, she journeyed 1 week a year and walked the Camino de Santiago, portion of the Camino de Santiago. So it's a really great book. It's a really great book. And it's
God's Hotel?
nonfiction, but like a story. Yeah, God's Hotel.
God's Hotel. And the Camino de Santiago, is that in Spain? Where is it at?
Yes. Oh,
I've
yeah.
had
So,
some telehealth patients who've gone on it, so I hear it from them. But tell us about it, because I only know
oh
from them.
my gosh, for me, it was the most healing and transformative thing I've done in my life. So, for my 58th birthday, part of my celebrating menopause and celebrating my post-menopause, and also kind of our own personal pilgrimage and healing journey too, and for many reasons, I decided to walk the Camino de Santiago, and there's many different routes. There's over a dozen different, very well, planned routes, not paved per se, but well planned routes that lead to the Compostela de Santiago and the Cathedral of Santiago, St. James, one of the original, so Santiago meaning St. James, one of the original 12 disciples of Jesus. Reportedly his bones were buried there in this field where shepherds saw these stars, so hence Compostela de Santiago, the stars of St. James. And people started pilgrimaging there, and his bones were found to be buried there, hidden, because he was martyred.
Hmm.
And so yeah, so it became this pilgrimage site. And basically in Europe, they say when you walk out the door and you walk to Compostela de Santiago, that's you're walking on the path of Santiago. The most famous route is the French route, which starts in uh, Saint Jean de Pied de Port, and that is like a huge, I mean, that's like over 1,000 kilometer trail, something like 750 to 1,000, depending on where you start. But from there, I think it's a very long, it's in 4 weeks hiking. And that's the most famous route through the Pyrenees Mountains, which I'm definitely going to be doing that leg of the segment soon. But I did the Portuguese coastal route, being half Portuguese, and I did the Portuguese coastal route, and I walked for 150 kilometers, so over 100 miles in 7 days. And it was transformative. When you get to the cathedral, it was just, you always believe the destination is, the journey is even more important than the destination. But let me tell you, when the destination is like reaching such a bliss, like some place that you've yearned for, worked
Hmm.
for,
Hmm.
relied on your own body for.
Hmm.
It was a beautiful experience. I mean, I was in tears, I was crying. And yeah, so that's the Compostela de Santiago, and you can do the English route, very primitive routes. I like the wine and great food and seafood of the Portuguese coastal route, I have to admit. But then I'm going to definitely do more. And this summer, I'm going to go again. I have blocked my Julys
Wow,
off.
that's amazing. So you're gonna make it like
Yes.
a ritual almost
Yes.
for
Yeah,
your
definitely.
for your own physical and spiritual, mental, emotional wellness, everything.
It is. It's everything. It's everything. And people walk for different reasons. I met this lovely young 23-year-old Russian man, and he's like, "Oh, for sport." But it's like, I came for sport. But, you walk and you walk with pilgrims, all ages, sizes, shapes. I mean, and you're inspired. And goes, yeah, it completely changed his life too. So it was really, everyone's different. Everyone's different, different reasons, different stories. But for me, I got to know myself well. And that's where oftentimes as moms, as physicians, I mean, we're so much for so many people, we have personas.
Yeah,
When you are walking and your feet hurt and you feel like you can't make another step, but you do, and you get up and do it again,
yeah,
and you really get to know and have more faith and trust in yourself than at least that I did in any other time. And I just had to be me. I could
hmm,
only be me
yeah.
on that journey.
That's beautiful. Do you go alone, or do you bring friends, or?
This time, this was my first journey, and it just like it got set on my heart to go and prayed about it, and I went in 2 weeks, and I would highly recommend walking a lot more before you go on a journey like this, preparing a little bit more. But I went by myself. A girlfriend of mine, another physician, was going to go with me, but she couldn't get out of her clinic. So, I went on my own, and I was very glad that I did. And I met this group of 5 couples that were renewing their vows after 20 years or so of marriage with their priest. And the priest would tell them, you each have to walk in silence at least 1 to 2 hours each day. So they really encourage that. For me, you get interactions. Like sometimes I'm walking in silence, sometimes I'm walking with, getting to know a new friend from a stranger, right?
Mhm.
And, yeah, so it's all different. I think this time when I go in July, I'm not sure. I always say, God knows, not me, but, I plan to go with friends this time, but we'll
I
see.
love it. It sounds to me like Dr. Cabeca that this could be like an amazing book for you.
That's the plan too. Like we
Okay.
didn't plan it before, but
Yeah.
talking about oxytocin
Yeah.
and integrating it into my Camino. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Like this spiritual journey that you've been on and the stories and the people you've met, I think would be a beautiful book.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm going to tell
Yeah.
my publisher right now.
Yeah. And I think we still have the same literary agent. Do you still work with Heather Jackson?
I do. I
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
That's funny.
Actually, yeah. I'm going to tell her you said so,
Yes,
Will.
you
That
tell
might.
Heather. I just texted her before we started. That's hysterical. Wait, I forgot we had Heather Jackson in common, the same book agent for years. I mean, all my books have been with Heather Jackson.
Me too. Yep.
I love it. I love it.
I love
It's
her. She's
book
great.
book
She's been great.
siblings. Yeah. All right, my friend.
What
Where
are
do
you
people?
working on? Are you working on
No,
another book?
not at the moment. Not at the moment. I'm still full telehealth mode, and then obviously the podcast. But my one of the main reasons was my son Solomon was going to college, and I knew because I see patients during the week. I can't. I'm writing on the weekends and in the evenings, so I knew I'm gonna soak in as much time with him as possible. So now that he's in college and he's in his first semester, I feel like, okay, now I can have a little bit more bandwidth. I just didn't want any more because going 4 books back to back, I knew like this. I was not gonna divide my time any more than what it was divided with, and I wanted all my time with him. So it was like full dad mode when I wasn't seeing patients.
Totally. I completely get
Yeah.
that. My youngest is 16. She'll be a senior next year. I'm like, yeah, yeah, not missing a single rodeo, not
No,
missing, like, gonna
no,
be
take
there.
it in, take it in. You don't get
Mhm.
it back. You don't get it back. So
No,
it's something you think about as a parent. I think when you come into these big moments of like, wow, time is a vapor, as they say. Yeah.
so true.
Yeah. Where do people go? Where do people go to learn more about all these amazing things you're doing?
Thank you. So, yeah, guys, we could just talk forever. This has been a nice catch-up call,
I
right?
know. That's right. We'll do it again.
Yeah. So my website is dranna.com. So dranna.com. And, there's so much on that website. Certainly my podcast, definitely listen to the one with me and Will talking is so powerful, so powerful. And on Instagram at the Girlfriend Doctor. So I look forward to connecting more.
Thank you so much for coming on, friend. Anytime.